ask you someday, you'll have some material to say. Now, how many piccolo trumpet players do we have here today? Very good. How many are going to become piccolo trumpet players here today? Well, it's to your group that I'm going to address this. There's 2 or 3 things you want to know and remember carefully. Number 1 is whether you play the 4th piston with the forefinger of the left hand or the pinky of the right is entirely your decision. I recommend, though, if you're not going to use 4, at least make sure that you use the pinky in there and use it like a finger hook so that you start here, because I'll tell you something, if you're ever so unfortunate as to forget to do that and you start playing here, you're in for a very rude shock. You all see that? And I don't want to wish that on anybody. God forbid, I mean, you hit an important solo or you're playing a big Bach work or something and you did something, you kick yourself home all day for being so stupid. But we all do stupid things, but that's how you learn. Now, the other thing is, all piccolos today are tuned by this turn screw here, clamp on the lead pipe. So when you use this instrument, let's tighten it, shake off the pressure, come back and do it once more, because if that thing collapses while you're playing with pressure, you could do permanent damage. It could chip a tooth, it could lacerate your lips. I've seen these accidents happen, so I'm not kidding. The other thing is, this mouthpiece allows me to get around the horn with some facility without spending a lot of time practicing. The absence of metal on this cup up here is perhaps the secret. It's a lightweight. It was designed and built to play double high C's. It's a Doc Severinsen model by the Jet Tone Company. I don't play double high C. I never could, never will. I can't sell it. It's not in my book. That's something for special effects. But boy, it sure did work on the piccolo for me. Now, I own several piccolos, of course, starting with the prototype that Maurice Andre had built at Selmer in Paris. And I have the Scherzer, I have the Quignon. I never bought Bach's because I didn't deem it to be a worthy instrument. And the best one I found, and I'm not alone in that decision, is the lowly Getzen. Now, all of these things are up in the $2,000 price tag now, so you want to make sure that when you invest in an instrument like this, that you realize how many jobs you're going to have to do to pay the thing off. And come on in, guys. There are some seats up there in the back. Come around the front. It's quicker to get there. That piccolo demonstration is of some tower calls in Germany. In the days of the Guild, they were called a Blasen. And I'll talk more about that later. But let's go to the basic bread and butter trumpet, standard B-flat instrument. This one was built in 1930. It's a fabrication made by the Besson people when they were under litigation, so they couldn't stamp it Besson. But I don't think they've really improved on the instrument much since that time. And let's hear some music that I felt was something, had a nature of nobility, noble music, by Richard Wagner. Singer. And thank you very much for the applause, but if you want to hold all that till the very end, you may not want to applaud anymore anyway. But we all learn to play high and loud in time, and when fatigue comes, and it certainly will to all players, then it becomes very difficult to play piano. Now, there was the most famous story about piano playing. It had to do with a gentleman named Gus Hiem. He was the first player in the New York Philharmonic before Harry Glantz. This goes back to the 20s and early 30s. And they had a guest conductor coming down from Boston Symphony, it was a German orchestra at the time. The guest conductor's name was Hertz, just like Rent-A-Car. And he had heard about the capabilities of Gus Hiem, one of the loudest trumpet players in the business. Maybe not as loud as Pete Capodiferro, but nonetheless very loud. Anyway, he programs rehearsal. We start with Das Oberon Overture. The Oberon is an opera by Carl Maria von Weber. And on the front end of that thing, there's this little passage. And Gus proceeded to play for Maestro. Excuse me, Maestro, it's too loud. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we try it again? What? Oh, you don't want you want the sound of the open trumpet. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Gus was what they called the magician. And there was a doctor in his apartment building that retired, so he gave Gus his old satchel. You know how they opened up? They were just like gig bag. That was probably the first gig bag. I guess I saw somebody come in with one just a minute ago. This guy. And in that bag was sleeves, mouthpieces, mutes, all kinds of paraphernalia to overcome problems. And one of the problems was getting it down soft enough, so Gus used a Flugelhorn mouthpiece. And you can do that too, in case Maestro says one day you have to play softer. You wrap a piece of tape around it, and it should fit in the shank because it goes in deeper. The lower pitch will come up to just about where we were. Let's find out. Maestro's still screaming at him. You can see he's riding on him now. So Gus said, all right. We'll try it once more, Maestro. Now he knew how to use his second crook as a bell. That was one of the astounding revelations of the man. Now, along with the pursuit of the classical trumpet, we all hope to be purists and everything, and I must say that may be a mistake for gainful employment. I always found it to my advantage to have been exposed to some degree to more popular or commercial type playing, as the case may be. You know, when they call you to do a record date, sometimes they don't tell you what you're going to do. You're just supposed to do it. So, I'm going to play a couple of tunes that come to us on a TV show from 30, 40 years ago. Many of you will remember. And this was one of the opening themes written by the comedian that appeared on that show. Tunes. The next one was also part of the theme, but in the meantime the announcer came on and said, ladies and gentlemen, here is Jackie Gleason and The Honeymooners starring Art Carney, Audrey Meadows, and Jack was saying, away we go. And this was a tune that Jack wrote. It's called In a Blue Mood. Now the two trumpet players that kind of made that thing famous are both retired now, but they did a hell of a job. They played for Ray Bloch's orchestra over at CBS, and their names were Chris Griffin and Bernie Priven. They're both retired. Bernie, as you may know, was honored in the brass conference just last year. And this is In a Blue Mood. to be the savior that everybody thought it was going to be. I just mentioned to Mr. Kadrabic, I only play some operas on this instrument still. It's a C trumpet. And I had long talks with Vincent Bach about it, and he said it's immutable acoustical laws. And he drew me this diagram. Can you all see this stave? He said this is what happens to the C trumpet. It becomes compressed in the stave. The notes are closer together. And that's why we have the incompatibility sometimes of a C trumpet player with a group of B flat players. And he said, I can move that E, which is very difficult to play open and be in tune. Every C trumpet player I ever knew used 1 and 2 valve. So I can move it, but then the G goes way out of pitch. And that note you're going to use a lot of, and there's no way to control it unless you have a Jack Holland pitch finder, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Now, the next thing C trumpet players find is that the C has a very good timbre on 2-3 valve. The only problem there is C trumpet players may play an A flat and forget. So that's a clam. Now, you all know why we call a wrong note a clam? That comes to us from the old timers. They said, my boy, if you play that note and you shatter it or split it or do anything to destroy its intonation or tone value, it looks like a clamp. And there's an explanation for everything. Now, the next problem with the C trumpet is this D here, top stave, becomes a 1-3 valve. Now, all of this is something that you have to learn to control, and in fatigue, eventually, you don't know where you are. So that's why I've kind of lost confidence in the C trumpet. I used it maybe 10, 12 years, and then I gradually phased it out and followed Mr. Bacchiano, my teacher's advice, to go directly to the D trumpet, bypass the C altogether. But I'm going to play a couple notes on the C just to see if it's worth its trouble. Let's see if you know this too. Goes back a few years. By the first cellist of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. His name was Victor Herbert. I'll talk about him a little more later. All right, let's bypass the C. When Selmer, Elkhart, Bach heard what I was doing with this instrument, they got quite upset. They didn't say anything to me, but I heard in a roundabout way. And I can sympathize with them. This is a C trumpet. It's a Bach C trumpet. But at the instigation of Mr. Bacchiano, they cut it down deep. And that is the Jack Holland pitch finder that you see there. I control that main crook quite easily. I felt, well, it's pointless to be playing an accord in a big brass section and feel yourself out of tune. If I'm sharp, I can correct it immediately. If I'm flat, I just haul it in a little bit and then sunshine comes out again. Now, tuning is something that we all take pride in if you can figure out actually how to do it. The orchestra only tunes up on one note. What about all the rest of the notes? Well, I was taught many years ago to go with the local A. And the ability to play in tune meant to be able to match him, he's sharp, match him, he's flat, and go with weather so you always sound together. With a thing like that, you can do that. I felt it should have been standard equipment on all trumpets from the very beginning. Unfortunately, it was not. Now, when they cut it down to D, they only gave us about 1-inch slide pull, which is not enough without the thing coming out and jamming. They all do that because the tolerances are not close enough to really guarantee it. Further, the man in the shop, who was an ex-player, decided that his pitch was good enough even though he didn't play professionally. So he cut the thing too sharp. So you have to get one of these little tuning shanks to get in the other end. He also cut the first valve slide too short. So you have to put a little plastic sleeve in. It's ridiculous. But this D trumpet is what I use for the Tiger Sharks. Well, what is a Tiger Shark? That's something where you get chewed up. Operas like Electra, Salome, Die Frau ohne Schatten, Turandot, if you have to play both the stage and the pit parts at the same time, which we had to do in the Parks concerts. And here's the D trumpet in a little flashy little fanfare by Sir William Walton from his music score for the film starring Sir Laurence Olivier, who I'm also going to talk about a little more later down the road, from Henry V. Spots than I am pleased to admit, and I'm very grateful that I have an instrument like that. I have also the smaller E flat and the F trumpets, and the smaller E flat is like a miniature trumpet, and the last time I played it I used it on Parsifal. And for those of you who do not know, that's a rather long Wagner opera. It starts at 6 p.m. and it finishes right at the stroke of 12, so that paid overtime. And that's a long time sitting there. In all the Mozart operas, I played the Flugelhorn, or rotary valve instrument, which predated the instrument of pistons by quite a few years. Now, this valve was created in Berlin, Germany, by two gentlemen named Stölzel and Blumel, and they installed it on the French horn. Here's a miniature French horn right here. It's a coiled natural trumpet. But it wasn't until the mid-1800s that the Stölzel and Blumel Berliner Pumpen combined now with the French piston by Perronet that created the piston valve as we know it today, which is everything we've heard up to this point. Here's from another movie score. Maybe you'll all recognize this. It was a treasure to watch. It was made in 1954, one of the Fellini films. From. Starred Anthony Quinn and Juliet Messina, the Strada, correct. Now, what's next on the program here? Good old B-flat cornet. Frank was the solo B-flat cornet player in the West Point band, and he said I sat right in the back of him. I was playing the regular standard trumpet, and he had far more solos than I did, so I always had a great deal of envy for Frank and all those cornet players. And then when I got in the opera, I found out that if I play both the trumpet and the cornet, I get a doubling. Just like the flute and piccolo, or the oboe and the English horn. So I got myself one of these real quick. Here's a couple of snappy little passages from Charles Piccolo, Faust. cornet. I also have here a very, very old London Besson prototype in the E-flat key. And I use that to good advantage on those nights in fatigue where I have to sustain the tone through a very large chorus and orchestration. Here's one from Jacques Offenbach's The Tales of Hoff. Now, there are a couple other instruments of destiny. Here is a B-flat Flugelhorn. This one has perhaps the loveliest tone of them all. I don't use a Flugelhorn mouthpiece in it as I did play Gus Hiem's piano. I use a regular standard cornet mouthpiece. And I'm always envious of trombone and horn. Maybe I should have been a horn player like Mr. Jones. Do you all know Mason Jones? Can you stand up, sir? Yeah. Mason Jones. First horn. And here's another piece by Gounod. It's from the ballet music of Faust. Tone. A lot of conductors favor that, and so do I. You get a double for playing this too. Now, here's one you'll all recognize. I'm going to play it as if the parade were marching by in triumph. It's the end of the second act of Aida. Actually, we stand stationary and the parade goes by in front of us. You'll recognize this great Verdi tune.